Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. A very eventful day in the world's most volatile and strategic region, the Middle East, and the ripple effects from the region reaching right here in America, where I'm sitting right now, in particular, Washington, D.C. Today, of course, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS, was at the White House meeting with President Trump. And folks, this meeting comes amid talk of the Abraham Accords back on the table in a very big way. And the crown jewel of those accords would be Saudi Arabia coming to the table and normalizing relations with Israel. Well, that's very much on the table. MBS made clear today that, look, he wants to do it ASAP, as soon as possible. He expressed today verbally, more forcefully, I think, than he has in the past, we want to be a part of the Abraham Accords. We want to join the Abraham Accords. But folks, there's a caveat here. He wants a Palestinian state. And Prime Minister Netanyahu and his cabinet rightly are saying, no way, that ain't happening. So what do you think? Let me throw the ball out right now to you. What do you think? We've got a very educated audience of watchmen and women here on the channel. Is he going to continue to push for a Palestinian state, Mohammed bin Salman? Would the United States get behind that push? Would Israel ever agree to it? I think this is all worthy of discussion for sure. Now, I think the Trump administration over the past few years, really, because remember, if President Trump didn't leave office in early 2021, this was happening, folks, already. The Saudi-Israel peace deal, that was going down. The Abraham Accords came to fruition September 2020. I was there on the White House lawn when they were signed. What a day that was. But Bahrain, of course, the UAE, big signing ceremony that day. Prime Minister Netanyahu was there. President Trump was there. And then Morocco came on board. Sudan also, although Sudan's a mess, it's not quite sure where exactly they stand right now vis-a-vis Israel. But at the time, we're talking late 2021, right before the election, or the latter half of 2021, right before the November election. 2020, November 2020. Hey, all the talk was, okay, Saudi Arabia is next. And not just Saudi Arabia. What about Oman? What about Indonesia, Pakistan? Who knows what's next? And then the momentum was stalled and then some, thanks to Joe Biden taking office for 4 very unfortunate years. But now the momentum is back. The Iranian axis, Iran itself, the head of the snake, and its ring of fire have been largely smashed down, not out for sure, as we've been cautioning you here on the live stream, but down and weakened to the point where nations are saying, okay, there's an opening here to make peace with Israel. Israel has proven itself very much to be the strong horse in the region. And that's what the Sunni Arab nations are looking for. They want to align themselves with a winner, with the strong horse, against that Iranian Shia axis. By the way, I should have mentioned as well, a week or two ago, Kazakhstan joined the Abraham Accords as well. Look, that didn't have the massive, obviously, implications that the Saudis joining would. But look, it's another nation coming into the fold. And the more nations come into the fold, it emboldens other Muslim nations to say, okay, it's okay maybe to make peace with Israel. But Saudi, certainly, that's the big one. Look, Saudi Arabia, the symbolic meaning, obviously, of them joining the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of Islam. Mecca, Medina, the 2 holy sites of Islam, the 2 holiest sites of Islam, are in that nation. It's the birthplace of Muhammad, of course. So massive symbolism if the Saudis were to join, but that sticking point, a Palestinian state, and which would be disastrous, I believe, on every level, and that Israel certainly should not agree to. And I posed the question a minute ago, what do you think? And are there prophetic implications to all of this? What do you think about that? Does the Bible have anything to say about what we're seeing right now? The Abraham Accords coming together. Some people have said, look out. The Abraham Accords are, the false peace talked about in Daniel, in the book of Revelation. This isn't that, folks. To me, the Abraham Accords are not that. The Abraham Accords, to me, have been a net positive And I've been on the ground in the UAE, I've been on the ground in Bahrain, and I've seen the effects. And it's a genuine partnership between those nations and Israel. Saudi Arabia and Israel, we shall see. But I think that 7-year deal, false treaty brokered by the Antichrist, eventually, the book of Revelation talks about it, is not the Abraham Accords. But there is a downside here if a Palestinian state's on the table. I mean, talk about bad timing for such a state. And we talked about it here in the live stream over the past few months with Britain, France, Canada, Australia shamefully, unilaterally declaring their support for a Palestinian state, not even 2 years after October 7th. So we're going to reward the Palestinians with a state after Hamas roared out of Gaza and massacred 1,200 Israelis? It's insanity. And there's no way Prime Minister Netanyahu and the current government in Israel will ever agree to that. So, as Mohammed bin Salman says, look, we want to join the Abraham Accords, but Palestinian state, I don't know that you'll find a very receptive ear in Israel to that. But we'll break it down more. F-35s going to Saudi Arabia. The United States, President Trump announced today, he verified and said, yes, we're going to sell F-35 fighter jets to Saudi Arabia. I don't think Israel's very happy about that. So what do you think of that? Number two, a busy day, as I said at the top. Deadly terror attack in Judea, the biblical heartland in Gush Etzion. We had an Israeli strike against Hamas, a pretty lethal one, and not in Gaza. I'll share more about that. The UN, major announcement yesterday that it recognizes, the UN Security Council recognized President Trump's 20-point Gaza peace plan that he unveiled last month. Now the UN Security Council, for what it's worth, has said they're behind it too. And lastly, and this one's big, and it's something I've been talking about personally for, 17 years longer. I mean, I've been at this for 22 years, 23 years, 23 actually. I'm getting old. But I wrote a book about the Muslim Brotherhood in 2013. It's called The Brotherhood, America's Next Great Enemy. And I remember at the time thinking, well, the subtitle, America's Next Great Enemy, is that maybe an exaggeration? And now I'm looking around, I'm saying, no, it's not. In the past 24 months alone, I'm sitting here in Texas right now, 48 mosques, 48 have been built in Texas in the past 24 months alone. Wrap your head around that. And today, big news, Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced that the Muslim Brotherhood is banned from Texas. Not allowed here in Texas. He has declared that the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, he designated them as foreign terrorist organizations. That's the government of Texas. And I'm waiting for this to become law nationwide. We're going to talk more about that as well and why I believe the Brotherhood should be banned in America. It's long overdue. It's been banned in Austria, Saudi Arabia, Russia, other nations, other Middle Eastern nations. Why not America? This is madness. So we're going to talk about that. But God bless Greg Abbott. And thank you, Greg Abbott, for doing that, Governor Greg Abbott, here in Texas. But before we dig into the very important developments today at the White House, and keep the comments coming, keep the chat going. I want to know what you think about all of these issues. Two things here. Number one, be sure to subscribe, of course. Click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Man, I'd love to reach 1.1 million subscribers by the end of this year. That'd be awesome. We'd love for you to help us get there. And secondly, our partner for today, don't forget our good friends at Magen David Adom, SaveLivesIsrael.com. And that's exactly what they're doing. The name doesn't lie. They are saving lives every day in Israel. In a time of a seven-front war where Israel's waging Iran and its proxies, and today there's a terror attack in Gush Etzion, which we'll talk about. 1 Israeli killed, 3 severely wounded. Magen David Adom, they are the first on the ground every time. Every terror attack, missile attack, rocket attack, Magen David Adom first responders are the first on the ground. They are Israel's emergency services system. They respond to every terror attack in Israel. And not only that, a heart attack, a car accident, Magen David Adom first responders are there. They dispatch every ambulance in Israel, and they receive thousands of emergency calls every day, by the way, especially in a time of war. They collect, process, and distribute Israel's blood supply, not only for the IDF, but for civilians as well. Look, this is a largely volunteer force. 90% of their EMTs, paramedics, and first responders are volunteers. Imagine that. They're doing this for free, blessing their fellow countrymen and women, doing God's work absolutely free. And look, they're paying a price. Over 30 Magen David Adom volunteers have been murdered, killed since October 7th, since the massacre over 2 years ago, and they've lost over 17 of their ambulances. And I'm in Israel frequently. Those Magen David Adom ambulances are everywhere. They're doing amazing work. It's SaveLivesIsrael.com. SaveLivesIsrael.com. They're our partner for today's live stream. They need more ambulances. They need bandages, medical supplies, and much more. They're stretched very thin right now. Over 2 years of a 7-front war that Israel's been faced with, and Magen David Adom is on the front lines, and you're fulfilling that biblical mandate laid out in Genesis 12:3 to bless Israel. I can't think of a better way to do it. SaveLivesIsrael.com. So what do we think? I know we're commenting furiously and feverishly about this visit today to the White House by Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi Crown Prince. Some quick thoughts here. Number one, the F-35 fighter jet deal is happening. And look, Congress in the U.S. maintains that Israel must maintain that qualitative edge, as they call it, in the Middle East. Israel must be the strongest military in the Middle East. Why? That's in America's interest, because Israel's enemies are America's enemies, and Israel is the front line. They're the first line of defense for Western civilization. So it's not in America's interest, needless to say, to see a Muslim nation, which is very likely not aligned with America's interest in the long term and overall, become stronger militarily than Israel. So Israel maintains, with help from the United States, that qualitative edge, although I've been saying for years now, and you've heard me say it, and now it's becoming more of a conversation, even in Israel, hey, the less reliant on the United States, the better. And I say that as a proud American who loves Israel, who loves the U.S.-Israel alliance, but the more reliant Israel can come just internally in terms of weapons production, the better. And I think Israel gets that. It was a wake-up call during the Biden years, when Biden, look, cut off arms shipments at one point. Israel can't always rely on having a pro-Israel president like Donald Trump in office. And that's been shown very clearly, especially with the state of the Democrat Party today, where the loudest, I should say, not even, they're loud, yes, but the most influential voices, I should say, the real power brokers in the Democrat Party are on the far radical anti-Israel left. I think the biggest stars, and I use that word advisedly, in the Democrat Party today, Zoran Mamdani, the Islamo-communist, soon-to-be mayor of New York City, AOC, Bernie Sanders, the aging commie, and Gavin Newsom wants to be the guy, and maybe he will for them in 2028, but these are all people from the hardcore radical left, and AOC, Mamdani, and Sanders in particular. Mamdani's viciously anti-Israel, again, an Islamo-communist who is tied to Islamists, pictured with radical Islamists, the whole nine yards. AOC aligned with the Ilhan Omars of the world. Bernie Sanders, an Israel hater, and he's a Jew, which is insane, but he's a radical leftist. He puts that ideology beyond and above anything. But these are the stars. These are the people who are moving the needle in the Democrat Party today and bringing in the cash and all the enthusiasm. So I say all that to say there's a very good chance in 2028, which ain't too far off if you really think about it, the Democrat nominee could be a radical leftist who's hostile to Israel. That is not beyond the realm of possibility. A lot can happen over the next 3 years. Things move very quickly. And in the Democrat Party, they have taken a hard turn against Israel. So if you're Israel and you're seeing that, and you're saying, look, perhaps there'll be a Democrat in office one day again. There might not always be a Republican pro-Israel president. If you're Israel, do you really want to be in that position? where you have maybe an over-reliance at times on American arms? No, you don't. This is wisdom. Hey, Noah built the ark before it started raining, right? So this is wisdom for Israel to get ahead of that. God forbid that ever happens, but you never know. Get ahead of it and produce more weapons domestically. And Israel's doing that. But look, Israel's a tiny country. I mean, the United States is a massive economic superpower, a superpower in every way that can churn out materials. I mean, Israel is a nation of 10 million people, about 8 million Jews. It's a nation the size of the state of New Jersey. So mass production in Israel, it's going to take longer for Israel to mass produce weapons, but they're in the process of trying to do it, and good for them. It's wisdom to do that. And by the way, I talk about reliance. Look, Israel does rely on American armaments, not completely, but it's a big part of Israel's toolbox when it comes to waging war against terror. But there have never been, and this is something, we have this rising anti-Israel movement, and even in a portion of the right, on a segment of the right, the Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens wing. You would think, listening to them, that, man, there's American boots on the ground in Israel fighting Israel's battles. That's insane. It's never happened. It's a lie. And everyone knows that. Israel has never asked for American troops to join them in their wars, in their battles. And President Trump, when he joined in June at the tail end of the 12-day war and struck Iran's nuclear weapons facilities, the U.S. acted alone there. Israel laid the groundwork and bombed those facilities, some of them in the days prior. But President Trump made a unilateral decision there. Why? Because America and Israel's interest aligned. In that instance, in most instances, really, I think, when it comes to foreign policy, national security, but especially there where Iran was working on nuclear weapons, which would have threatened Americans. So President Trump made the common sense call, no brainer. Take out those facilities before they can one day kill Americans, not just Israelis. So remember that when we talk about the Israel-U.S. alliance. And look, we have an alliance between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. And a lot of people hold their noses, of course, when they think about that. But things are moving here. And the F-35s, look, it's going to happen. I think Israel will retain its qualitative edge, no doubt. That's without a doubt. But I don't blame Israel for not being happy about it. Look, Mohammed bin Salman is a reform-minded guy. And the kingdom has gone in a different direction for sure over the past decade or so, for sure. I mean, who could have believed a decade ago that we'd even be discussing normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel? So that's all good. Israel's more concerned about a possible day after MBS. Anything can happen in the world's most unpredictable region. In the Middle East, expect the unexpected. And MBS has done a great job in getting the jihadis in Saudi Arabia under control. For sure, he's cracked down on them. But there's still a jihadi element there, no doubt, which is none too happy about MBS possibly striking a deal with Israel. So anything can happen. Just as you may not always have a pro-Israel Republican president in the United States, and Israel has to consider that, Israel also has to consider that there may not always be an Israel-friendly leader in Saudi Arabia, someone who's open to relations with Israel. Anything can happen. So Israel, yeah, for that reason, Israel's saying, look, MBS, we think, trust might be a strong word, trust but verify, but MBS does not have designs against us, Israel is saying. Quite the opposite. He wants to do business with us. With the Arab Gulf states, many times that they're economically focused. President Trump gets that. That's why he's used economics, financial incentives as a carrot for the Arab Gulf states to bring them to the table. He secured trillions of dollars in investment from them alone, the Arab Gulf states. I think $600 billion from Saudi Arabia, then Qatar, UAE have pitched in. President Trump, $22 trillion overall in foreign investments in only 10 months in office. Pretty astounding. Doesn't get the credit he deserves for that, in my view. It's foreign policy through commerce is essentially what he's doing. But Israel has to consider all of these factors. And they say, okay, MBS, not our enemy, doesn't have designs against us, but there are others in Saudi Arabia who could be our enemies. So yeah, we're uneasy with them having F-35s, and that's totally understandable. Number two, the Palestinian state issue, and I asked this question at the top. Non-starter, obviously, and biblically, a non-starter, dividing up the land once again. And people don't want to hear this. Some people, well, you can't bring the Bible into it. Oh, no, you can. And I think of Zechariah 12, where God says a day is coming when Jerusalem in particular, and remember, the Palestinians want half of Jerusalem, the eastern half, as their capital of the Palestinian state. A day is coming where Jerusalem will become like a burdensome stone, a cup of trembling for every nation, and every nation that comes against it will be cut to pieces because they're trying to divide the land that God has given to the people of Israel. It's already only the size of the state of New Jersey. If the world had its way, Israel would be the size of Rhode Island. And if you're not American, we have viewers from all around the world. I know Rhode Island is tiny. So the Palestinian state, is that going to be the deal breaker here? Now, the Trump administration, I was started to say at the top, and then I changed the subject, but let me come back to it real quick. They've been thinking throughout that, look, maybe we can do something kind of rhetorical, symbolic to kind of satisfy the Saudis here, where the Saudis can go back. Here's the deal, back to that topic, MBS. Can he face the Saudi public and say, okay, we have peace with Israel, we signed on to the Abraham Accords, but here's what we got in return. And the ultimate caveat for him, which would please his domestic base, would be we got a Palestinian state. What will satisfy the people of Saudi Arabia? That's his question right now. Can I agree? He wants to normalize with Israel, believe me. But he's saying, if I agree to normalize without a Palestinian state, I'll catch hell back home. So he's got to figure that out, what he wants to do. And perhaps the Trump administration can be creative in that, in wording things that would maybe appease or satisfy the average person on the ground in Saudi Arabia. I don't know. But I do know President Trump is absolutely committed to making this deal work with between Saudi Arabia and Israel. He sees it as part of his legacy, I think. Secondly, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been saying, I interviewed Bibi almost 3 years ago, right before he took office again. And he said, look, I said, Prime Minister, what are your goals? Stop Iran, number one. Number two, Abraham Accords, expand them, and peace with Saudi Arabia. He's been talking about it for years. So I think Bibi, Trump, and MBS are all aligned here. They all want it. But I think the Palestinian state issue for Israel, absolute non-starter for obvious reasons. And for MBS, he kind of needs that to be in the picture so he's not targeted and that his people aren't furious. So it's a very, very delicate situation right now, but I think all the momentum is moving in this direction. And I think prophetically, it's part of, if you look at the book of Ezekiel, chapters 30, 37, 38, the war of Gog and Magog, before it seems that Israel is living in peace at the time that this latter days invasion happens, which includes Iran, Turkey, quite possibly Russia, I believe. If you read Ezekiel 37 and 38, by the way, it uses ancient names for modern nations. But Turkey and Iran, you can take that to the bank. They'll be in it. But it seems that Israel is living in a time of peace when they come against Israel. It's a land of unwalled villages, the Bible says, at the time of this. So I think what you're seeing now in the wake of the October 7th wars, as we call them, against Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, etc., you're seeing a period of peace here that's going to be ushered in, I think. May not last long, but you're going to see the Abraham Accords, I think, more of those treaties signed. I think Saudi and Israel, that's inevitable. And there'll be a period of relative peace and some economic prosperity as well in the region. And Iran and its axis may be weakened even further because, look, Israel may hit Iran again because Iran's trying to rearm and rebuild its ballistic missile program with help from China, by the way. Surprise, surprise. So we're heading into perhaps a period of peace and prosperity in the Middle East. Imagine that. But if you know the word of God, you know the Bible, ultimately that's going to unravel down the road. I don't know when, but I think the Saudis and Israel coming together could be part of that period of peace and prosperity. And, the book of Ezekiel says when that war unfolds, that war of Gog and Magog, funny name, I know, but read it in your Bible, Ezekiel 38 and 39. It says that the nations of the world pretty much stand back and they watch this happen. And many think Sheba and Dedan, which are mentioned there, many think that could be the Arab Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, who say, what are you doing to the invasion force that comes against Israel? Why are you doing this? But they don't physically intervene to help. They might complain. There may be a few UN resolutions passed, but that's about it. So very interesting how things are lining up. Make no mistake, folks, the prophetic chess pieces are moving on the board. Things to mention today, Gush Etzion in Judea, the biblical heartland. The world calls the West Bank. We call it Judea and Samaria because that's what the Bible calls it. A man was stabbed to death and 3 other people were wounded in a terror attack at Gush Etzion Junction, a place I've been. 2 Palestinian terrorists did a car ramming. Then they got out and stabbed several victims. Thankfully, Israeli security forces killed the 2 Palestinian terrorists, but this is life, right? In Israel, this is what they're facing. I mentioned the UN Security Council voted to recognize and adopt President Trump's Gaza peace plan. We'll see where it goes from there, if that makes a difference. And Israel carrying out a major strike today in Sidon, in Lebanon, taking out 13 Hamas terrorists. You might say, wait, I thought Hamas was only in Gaza and the West Bank. No, they're in Lebanon as well. Not as large a presence, obviously, but Israel, over the past 2 years plus, has carried out several strikes in Lebanon against Hamas operatives there. So a big one today. And that final story, and let me just read Governor Greg Abbott. If you're just joining us, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, I'm in Texas right now. He today designated the Muslim Brotherhood and the Council on American Islamic Relations, known as CAIR, C-A-I-R, as foreign terrorist organizations and transnational criminal organizations. This designation authorizes heightened enforcement against both organizations and their affiliates and prohibits them from purchasing or acquiring land in Texas. Why is that important? I mentioned at the top, 48 mosques have opened in Texas in the past 24 months alone. Do you think there's a strategy here? This is the Muslim Brotherhood blueprint. They did it in Europe, and now it's come to America's shores. Mamdani, mayor of New York City now, other Muslims running for office, Minneapolis, etc. He lost, but Mamdani, of course, won. There's a blueprint here. And the Europe model has worked swimmingly for them. Look at Europe. Go to London today. It's unrecognizable in parts. And that strategy in places like Dearborn, Michigan, New York City, Minneapolis, now Texas of all places. Yes. And why Texas? Obviously calculated. Texas is the epitome of faith, family, and freedom, everything America stands for. So, of course, Islamist forces like the Brotherhood want to target Texas and flip Texas into their agenda. Greg Abbott, a little bit more from his statement. The Muslim Brotherhood and CAIR have long made their goals clear to forcibly impose Sharia law and establish Islam's mastership of the world. This is the governor of Texas saying this. Amen. And we need this coming from the Oval Office as well. And maybe it will in the next few years. The Muslim Brotherhood should be designated by the federal government as a terror organization banned in America. And Abbott said, look, I've designated them as foreign terrorist organizations, transnational criminal organizations, and they are not welcome in our state and are now prohibited from acquiring any real property interest in Texas. I hope it's not too late because, again, 48 mosques in the past 2 years alone. He's on it, but now they're entrenched. So let's see, Texas, what happens here. But the Muslim Brotherhood, look, to give you an idea who they are, if you don't know, I wrote a book about them in 2013. You can still pick it up on Amazon.com. It's called The Brotherhood, America's Next Great Enemy. Hamas is the self-declared Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's number one. That's really all you need to know. Number two, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, the al-Qaeda leaders, al-Baghdadi, the ISIS leader. Before they joined al-Qaeda and ISIS, they belonged to the Muslim Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is the gateway drug to jihad. It has no place on American soil. Thank you, Greg Abbott. And I hope this comes from the federal level very soon as well. A lot going on. Keep it all in prayer. Great to have you with us as always. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.